Hello and welcome to Dugout Debrief. I'm your host, Chris DeLuca. This is Boom Broadcasting's one, first, and only baseball-centric podcast. And guess what? It is opening day. It is one of the best days of the year in sports, if you ask me. One of the best days in the world at all, because in T-minus 3 hours, we will have Major League Baseball, and we will have Major League Baseball on every single day in some capacity until July 13th. Well, to July 14th is the home run derby. So I believe the futures game is the 13th, but the last game on most of the schedules that I saw of before the All-Star break was the 13th, and then we'll have that little gap. But regardless here, we have a bunch of games here starting at 3 p.m. We have games starting at 7. We have games starting at 10 p.m. all on the East Coast, of course. So with that being said here, we have a decent program here ahead of us. Today, we'll be doing our news as we always do, and then we're going to be doing ranking every single starting pitcher, opening day starting pitcher. And then we'll also be doing our American League standings predictions. And then next week, we'll be doing the National League, plus we'll be doing some playoff predictions as well. So I figured I'd break that up into a couple pieces here just so we could have some normal length shows. I try not to go too crazy long. With that being said, we actually have a decent amount of news coming out of Major League Baseball here in the past week. Alex Verdugo signs with the Atlanta Braves on a $1.5 million deal. The man who struck out to end the World Series for the New York Yankees, former Dodger Alex Verdugo, signs with the Braves. They add another outfielder. I think that's a good idea, especially with some of the injuries that they've dealt with in the outfield. Of course, Ronald Acuna Jr. was tragically injured earlier in the year last year. We don't like to see that. Ronald Acuna Jr. is a fantastic player, fantastic defensive outfielder, and honestly an MVP candidate every single year when he's healthy, and he's a major part of that Braves team remaining a contender. Next, the Braves add another legendary player. They add Jesse Chavez on a $740K contract. This is his fourth appearance with the Braves. The 41-year-old has played for 9 teams, and he's been pretty darn good with the Braves. 3.13 ERA last year and a 1.56 the year before with Atlanta. He's kind of been around forever. He's known for the glasses. He's known for playing for a bunch of teams. And, if he didn't just consistently re-sign with the Braves, he'd probably be up there for the record of the most teams played for, because I believe the record is about 14, 15, something like that. So, yeah, Jesse Chavez, I believe in a minor league deal, so he'll probably be starting the year in Gwinnett, but here's hoping that he makes it back up to Atlanta and we get to see him again. Next, we have Kyle Gibson. Kyle Gibson signs with the Baltimore Orioles. They add another pitcher. It's a little bit too little too late when Zach Eflin is your opening day starter. Kyle Gibson signs to a $5.2 million deal for 1 year. So those are the major free agency signings. Cal Raleigh also signed a pretty substantial extension with the Seattle Mariners. I think that was in the 56 some million dollar range. So he's one of the higher defensive rated catchers. The Cleveland Guardians acquire Nolan Jones for Tyler Friedman. So from the Colorado Rockies, the former second round pick and top prospect of the Rockies moves to Cleveland. And honestly, I'm just kind of baffled. We've talked about the Rockies mission, or whatever, I guess their vision, I guess, is the best thing. And I don't really agree with their vision necessarily. I don't think that it's very productive. I feel like the team is okay with kind of just being a social experience for Denver business people, not a functioning ball club. And this is kind of going outside of trading Nolan Jones. I mean, of course, he's not been the most productive, but he's one of your former highly touted prospects. I mean, you kind of got to work with him. And Charlie Blackmon just retired. That's not good for them. And he was still productive even into his retirement year. And that's what's kind of interesting. Like, I saw a few TikToks about this. And, what I've heard about Rockies games from social media and what I've heard from friends of mine who were interns out in Denver or worked out there for larger companies is the Rockies, it's mostly just people going in executive suites and just paying a bunch of money and, socializing and all that, which I don't have a problem with that at all. All 29 other ball clubs do that as well. But instead of allocating the resources that you get from that towards improving the quality of play on the field, and having a better product, I feel like they just kind of hoard that money. Denver is, I believe, the eighth or so biggest sports market in all of professional sports. You have teams that have seen success relatively recently. Broncos made the playoffs. Nobody expected that to happen. Colorado Avalanche recently won a Stanley Cup. The Denver Nuggets recently won a Stanley Cup. You have a guy like Jokic, who's a big face of the game, who's playing there. And Nathan McKinnon with the Avalanche. And really, now what? Who do the Colorado Rockies have? So I'm not saying that Nolan Jones is going to be that kind of Jokic face, but he didn't have the best 2024, negative 0.7 WAR, only hit 3 home runs, and he batted 227. But he has upside. That's the thing. I'm not saying Tyler Freeman doesn't have upside. Tyler Freeman performed better in 2024, and he's also a second-round pick. But I just feel like Nolan Jones, you got to invest in him, and he only played 3 full major league seasons, I believe 3. And really, what are you going to get out of this trade? I don't really get it. But regardless of that, this isn't a Rockies podcast. This is the second time that I've kind of just gone on a random sidetrack about the Rockies. I really shouldn't. They're kind of forgotten, and that's unfortunate. And I feel like a lot of that they kind of did to themselves. Anyway, Mark Canha was traded to the Kansas City Royals from the Milwaukee Brewers for cash considerations, and another good deal. A guy who does strike out a lot, but he hits a lot of home runs too. He's been around in the league for a while. He played for the A's for quite some time. He was a part of those later 2010 playoff teams. So yeah, Mark Canha on the Royals, I think that's a good addition. He can play a few different positions, and he can bring some more power to that lineup that already has a decent amount of power with guys like Pasquantino and Bobby Witt Jr. So good move by the Royals. Patrick Corbin signs a 1-year deal with the Texas Rangers for $1.1 million. He was a part of that Washington World Series team. And one of the last pieces, if not the last piece, that they really have left from that 2019 team, which is just crazy to think about. It kind of feels like that was a fever dream ago. But yeah, Patrick Corbin to the Rangers, another back end guy. They might move him to the bullpen. I think that's a good move. He's a veteran. He's really struggled, obviously. But you bring a guy with experience into an already pretty darn good rotation. I think that's a good idea. Alejandro Kirk signs a $58.5 million deal. 5 years with the Blue Jays. So he resigns with Toronto. I think that's a good move. He's 7th WAR among catchers. He had 9. He had a 9 WAR last year. That's pretty darn good. And catchers, they're a commodity. I mean, really, especially these days, you don't have a lot of all-star catchers anymore. That's not something that you're seeing outside of like Adley Rutschman. There's guys like Sean Murphy, who you would think really would have been that kind of perennial all-star catcher, but he struggled with injuries. Kirk has a decent amount of power. He's a pretty good defensive catcher. But yeah, I mean, you got the Contrerases. They're both pretty good too, but not at this elite level. That's why it's like outside of Adley Rutschman, I don't think you're going to be seeing, this Johnny Bench, Mike Piazza kind of catchers, at least for the foreseeable future, which is really sad because, in my opinion, catcher is probably the second hardest position to play in all of sports behind hockey goaltender. So that's unfortunate that you're not going to see them put in these household names. So really just some other notable acquisitions. Miguel Margot signs a 1-year deal with the Detroit Tigers. The reliever Ryan Yarborough signs a 1-year deal with the New York Yankees. I think that's a pretty good pickup. Another middle reliever for that Yankees team could really help out, especially with the injuries they've been dealing with. Former Yankee catcher Jose Trevino signs a 3-year deal with the Cincinnati Reds. And the Braves also bring back Craig Kimbrell. So, they're kind of bringing a lot of people back, bringing Jesse Chavez back, bringing Craig Kimbrell back. Of course, he was one of the best relievers in recent Braves history. There have been talks if he's a Hall of Famer. Do I think he is? No. But I just don't think his prime was necessarily long enough. It's so hard to get in as a reliever. But yeah, Kimbrel back with the Braves. He kind of bounced around, was with the Cubs, he was with the Padres, with the Dodgers, and yeah. So that's the main news here. So now it's going to be time for us to rank every opening day starter. And I don't have a lot of stats pulled up for this, to be completely transparent with you guys. I'm probably going to be pulling up some baseball references while we go. I have a little bit of notes about them, but there's 30 of them. It's a little bit hard to go do that, have all that written out. So we're going to start with 30 here, and 30 here actually was statistically, technically one of the best starters, but he also only started 3 games. He only played in 4. He had a 1.42 ERA last year, and he's probably the least known starter out of all 30 of them. It is Sean Burke of the Chicago White Sox. Sean Burke, limited MLB exposure, but in that little limited exposure, he was pretty good. At 29, we got Kyle Freeland of the Colorado Rockies. Really all that they have at this point when it comes to pitching. He's actually really, if I'm being honest with you guys, he's the only pitcher that I can name off the top of my head without just looking up statistics. He had a 5.24 ERA last year, went 5-8. Just really not the best in general. That rotation on the Rockies is kind of rough, if we're being honest. I mean, again, I'm just pulling up their baseball reference right now just to go and try and take a look of pitchers that I can even think of. Chase Dollander, Austin Gomber, I do remember him. German Marquez, not exactly the best rotation for those Rockies, but we've been talking about him already. Won't hammer on him anymore. At number 28 is the former Cy Young Award winner, and it feels very weird to put him here, and it's Sandy Alcantara. And we talked about him last week on Dugout Debrief when we ranked every team's best player, because he is the best player for the Miami Marlins. He didn't play at all last year, and then 2023 he went 7-12, and 4.14 ERA coming off that 2022 Cy Young year. Just not fantastic. At number 27, we have a pitcher who is statistically great, but was a reliever last year. So I'm not really sure what the strategy is from those New York Mets, but it's going to be Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes, and again, not because he's bad. He had a 3.14 ERA as a reliever. He had 30 saves. I just think it's peculiar switching him at this point in his career. He's been in the league since 2018, and he's going in to his age 31 season. I just think that's a little bit interesting, moving him to a starting role, but I'm not an MLB manager, so what do I know? Next, we have a part of the Juan Soto deal that, honestly, with you guys, I've said this and hammered on this before. I still think the Washington Nationals won that Juan Soto deal, and it's Mackenzie Gore of the Washington Nationals coming in here next. Last year at a 3.90 ERA, went 10-12. And, he managed to start 32 games last year, and that's really good. Guys who can eat innings, guys who can play a full season. It's a big commodity these days, especially with pitchers. 166.1 innings pitched. Really, I would honestly put him higher on this list, because if you can play that many innings, you're going to get your ERA down. That's statistically, that will happen. So, with that being said, at number 25, we have a major signing, at least for the Angels here. Yoshi Kikuchi, who signed with the Angels in the offseason, coming off of his year where he played for the Blue Jays and for the Houston Astros in 2024. He had a 4.5 ERA, and he went 9-10. He obviously picked up his pace, going 5-1, having a 2.7 ERA with Houston, improving from his days in Toronto. But another one where kind of just a weird signing. I don't think it's necessarily the worst, but at least the Angels are trying. Next, we have another hot signing here from the offseason coming out of the AL West, and that is Luis Severino of the Oakland Athletics, as I will still call them. He's been playing all in New York his entire career, playing for the Yankees and the Mets. Last year, he went 11-7, 3.91 ERA. and he's going into his age 31 season. So, he's been productive. He remains productive, but he's moving straight across the country now to Sacramento, and maybe one day Las Vegas, but who knows if that'll even happen. At 23, we have Tanner Bybee of the Cleveland Guardians. Tanner Bybee, an interesting selection here. He is going into his age 26 season, and last year he had a 3.47 ERA and went 12-8. The Guardians rotation is always very fascinating to me. Kind of their whole strategy last year. Nobody expected them to win as many games as they did to make the ALCS. I didn't have them in my ALCS predictions. But it's a solid rotation with guys like Logan Allen, Ben Lively, Gavin Williams, Tristan McKenzie. I like it. I really do like it. I was kind of hoping that Tristan McKenzie would be able to be the starter here. He's dealt with a little bit of injuries and consistency issues, but I still think that he can be one of the best pitchers in the AL Central. So we're moving from one we're moving from one central division and one league to the next. And at number 22, we have Sonny Gray. We have the former A Sonny Gray here. Honestly, between the Cardinals rotation is really, really rough. No more Flaherty. You still got Miles Michaelis. And outside of that, I don't really know all that much to say here about him. He had a 3.84 ERA coming off the previous year with Minnesota, which is a lot better at 2.79. And I really don't think that the Cardinals have a lot to be desired when it comes to pitchers this coming year. Miles Michaelis, Eric Fetty, they went out and got Sonny Gray's there, and then Steven Matz. I don't see these starters combining for a lot of wins. Next, we're still staying in a Central. We're just jumping back to the American League, and we got Cole Reagans, who had a pretty good year last year, 3.14 ERA with Kansas City and 11-9. Was traded from the Texas Rangers in 2023. And he was a part of that Royals rotation that really went and exceeded expectations. Next, we have the Baltimore Orioles. We're finally leaving the Central for once. And we have Zach Eflin, who last year had a 3.59 ERA that dipped down once he got from Tampa to Baltimore, going weirdly from a more pitchers-friendly ballpark in Tropicana Field to a more hitter-friendly ballpark in Camden Yards, dropped down to a 2.6, went 5-2 with Baltimore. He ended the year pretty solid. Again, not terrible, but still not the best. At number 20, we go all the way across the country, and we go to the Seattle Mariners, and we have Logan Gilbert. Went 9-2 last year, 3.23 ERA. With that still remaining pretty solid, if not elite borderline rotation of the Seattle Mariners, including guys like Luis Castillo, Brian Wu, Bryce Miller, and of course the aforementioned Logan Gilbert. Oh, and George Kirby's there too. Can't forget about George Kirby. I do think that the Mariners should be trying to trade maybe some of these pieces, should consider that, because it's a very deep rotation. While these guys might not necessarily be elite statistically, they are worth a lot value-wise. So I think trading a guy like Brian Wu would not be the worst decision. Try and just get more power in that lineup. It's a very interesting roster. I mean, you extend Cal Raleigh, you have J.P. Crawford, who had a down year. Jorge Polanco's there. You signed Donovan Solano. Randy Arozarena was a big deal to go and get him. And that's a great outfield. I mean, Randy Arozarena, Victor Robles, and Julio Rodriguez. I mean, in my opinion, that is one of the best outfields out there, but there's a lot left to be desired when it comes to your infield. I mean, especially your middle infield there. Ryan Bliss, Dylan Moore, not been fantastic either. So the Mariners really should have gone out and spent more money with that, and then also with the bullpen. Staying in the West, next we have Framber Valdez of the Houston Astros. Valdez is kind of a part of this Astros team that's moving in a different direction. The 31-year-old last year had a 2.91 ERA, went 15-7, and he was part of that very good Astros rotation that they did lose a couple pieces, but still Net going into next year, it's a little bit different. Ryan Blanco was kind of all over the place last year. Hunter Brown also kind of struggled with consistency. So I don't know. We're going to talk about the Astros here a little bit later when we get to the division predictions, but it's hard to say. It's hard to say. Next, we have Carlos Rodon, I believe. Yeah, Rodon. He's one of those guys I always kind of mix up. Rodon last year had a 3.96 ERA, went 16-9, and obviously he's no Garrett Cole. That's why he ranks this low. Next, we have Shane McClanahan, my pick for comeback player of the year. I think he's going to have a pretty good year. I just think there's a lot of good starters in Major League Baseball and didn't play at all in 2024. 2023, he was really good, going 11-2 and a 3.29 ERA. Next, we have a Shota Imanaga, or no, it's going to be Justin Steele. My apologies. Correction there. Editor's correction. Imanaga started in Japan, the Japan series. So it is Justin Steele here. Last year, he had a 3.07 ERA and went 5-5. And I think he's a very productive pitcher, can eat a lot of innings. Next, we have Nathan Eovaldi of the Texas Rangers going back out west. Eovaldi, again, one of the most consistent pitchers, the 13-year vet, had a 3.80 ERA, went 12-8 last year. And now we're down to 13 here. We got Jose Barrios next of the Toronto Blue Jays. And after that, we got Zach Gallen, one of my dark horses for Cy Young. Love Zach Gallen. He was a major part of that Diamondbacks World Series run team. I always kind of forget he started with the Marlins, but, mid-threes ERA pretty much every single year. And 17-9 the year before last, 14-6 this year. Just a consistent pitcher. I got him on my fantasy team. Next, we got Freddie Peralta of the Milwaukee Brewers. And, we always say that the Rays are going to Ray, but the Brewers are going to Brewer too. Freddie Peralta remaining consistent even after so many names have left those Brewers. He went 11-9 last year with a 3.68 ERA. Next, we got another. We're now here in the top 10. Next, we got another just man who can eat so many innings. He is the expert at eating innings, and it is the man himself. It is Logan Webb. I'm a very big fan of Logan Webb of the San Francisco Giants. I know a Dodger fan saying that's crazy, but also I think Logan Webb is just a very consistent player. I wish the Dodgers had him, to be honest with you guys. I mean, just look at this. Past 2 years, he's led the league in innings pitched. Last year, he had 204.2. The year before, he had 216, 192.1 the year before, 148.1 the year before that. Every single year, this man has been starting 26, 32, 33, 33 games every single year. And he had tied the league in shutouts the past 2 years too, complete game shutouts. Mid-threes ERA every year, just a very consistent pitcher. And while his stats might not pop out at you, the fact that you can be pitching this many innings, again, as I said before, more innings you pitch, the lower your ERA is going to be statistically. But yeah, with that being said, we're now here in the top 10. This is where it kind of gets a little bit harder. We got Hunter Green of the Cincinnati Reds, a very boomer bust team. We'll be talking about the Reds more in depth next week when we do our National League breakdown. He had a 6.2 WAR last year, which is fantastic for a pitcher. 2.75 ERA. He went 9-5. Let's just hope he doesn't throw up on the mound again like he did twice last year, which, it's one of those things like the Dr. Doofenshmirtz joke where it's like, if I had a nickel for every time I saw a Cincinnati Reds pitcher named Hunter Green throw up on the mound, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Here I am laughing at my own jokes. Next, we got Garrett Crochet. We got Garrett Crochet, the Boston Red Sox. A big signing for them. He changes the color of his socks this offseason. Last year, he was one of the only bright spots that they had. Went 6-12 and a 3.58 ERA, and that's kind of sad. But he's a lot of people's dark horse for Cy Young, and I feel like if I don't put Garrett Crochet in the top 10, I'm going to get attacked in the comments. A lot of people are really big on him, and I'm kind of big on him, not to the level that a lot of people are there. Next, we have my pick for Cy Young in the American League, which, again, you can call me crazy, but another guy who is consistent, can eat innings, and it is Pablo Lopez. He had a 4.8 ERA last year, 15-10, but I think that guy's going to get it down to the 2s this year. Consistently pitching 185 innings, 194 innings, just Really, really consistent pitcher. I still think that the Twins won that trade with the Marlins. Next, we have Blake Snell. We have former two-time Cy Young Award winner coming from the Giants. He's spent a lot of his time here in the NL West now, previously with the Padres as well. 3.12 ERA last year, year before 2.25 with a 6.5 WAR in his 2023 Cy Young year. He's starting with the Dodgers. Dodgers obviously already had two games played already. Same thing with Chicago Cubs over in Japan, which we already covered that. Next, at number 5, we have an upset pick here that a lot of people are going to call me crazy for, and that is Michael King of the San Diego Padres, the former New York Yankee. The former New York Yankee went 13-9 last year with a 2.95 ERA, and I think he's one of the most underrated pitchers in the league. And then next, we have the most underrated pitcher in the league, and that is Zach Wheeler. Nobody talks about this man. I feel like he perennially finishes second Cy Young Award voting. He went 16-7. He had a 2.57 ERA, and once again, number 2 in Cy Young voting, I feel like every year, and that is the Philadelphia Phillies starter, Zach Wheeler. So, top 3 now. Top 3, we're getting into the meat of this here. So we have the Cy Young Award winner in the National League from last year. We have a man who got it a lot later in his career than we think at his age 34 season. We have Chris Sale. Chris Sale, the potential future Hall of Famer last year, led the league in most pitching categories. 2.38 ERA, 18-3, 6.2 WAR, just one of the best starters last year. And he's doing it at that age. That's what happens when he's healthy. That's all I can say is that's what happens when he's healthy. So now we're getting down really, really into it. And at number 2, we have Paul Skeens. We have the man who finished second National League Cy Young Award voting the former Rookie of the Year, went 11-3, 1.96 ERA. He's a lot of people's Cy Young Award picks. The man living up to the hype, the former LSU guy, will hopefully be able to repeat that, stay healthy, and keep that velocity. And then at number 1, it is the American League Cy Young Award winner, and it's really hard not to pick him because he had a fantastic year. He was a big part of the reason that his team made it this far, and it was Tarek Skubal of the Detroit Tigers is the number 1 opening day starter in 2025. 2024 to 6.4 WAR, 18-4 record, 2.39 ERA, and led the league in strikeouts with 228. So here we are, almost half an hour into this show, and we're not even at the main segment yet. So let's go and get through this here. Let's push through. So right now we're doing our American League standings predictions. And we're going to be doing the National League next week. Like I said, I don't really want to have an hour-long show here, so that's why I'm saving that for next week. So we're going to go start with the AL East. And this division, man, is just so hard to predict because there are so many good teams in there. So many teams did a lot, so many teams did a little. So I'm going to start in last and work up. And last place, I don't think this team is the worst team by a mile. I don't even necessarily think they're the worst team in their own division, but I just think they're going to end up finishing last because of the fact that they're not playing in their own stadium. They did lose some guys, but they also do sign some guys. And I just think that they need to let the farm system build once again, and they'll be right back up in that top 2, top 3 spot in that division. Unfortunately, I have the Tampa Bay Rays finishing in last place, and that's really just because their competition is so good. Lineup's still pretty solid. There's a lot of disrespect to the Rays. They made the World Series in 2020. A lot of those guys are gone. But as we say, Rays are going to Ray, Brewers are going to Brewer. In fourth place, I have the Toronto Blue Jays. And the Toronto Blue Jays are a boom or bust team because I think that if they're under 500 by the All-Star break, they should sell. I think that Bassett and Vlad Jr. should be gone. You're going to have to figure out what to do with Vlad Jr. Bichette's still there. You have such a great young core, but such a great competition around you. Next, I have our first of 3 wild card teams in the American League, and that is the Baltimore Orioles, who really did not do a lot. I think that pitching rotation is what's going to hold them back, but you still got Adley Rutschman. You still got Cedric Mullins, and you still have Gunnar Henderson. You have my potential Cy Young Award winner, not Cy Young Award winner, MVP in Gunnar Henderson. Gunnar Henderson, in my opinion, is one of the best middle infielders in the game. Next, you have a team that a lot of people have making the World Series, but I still don't know if they built enough. They did sign Garrett Crochet. They did sign Alex Bregman. I have my second of 3 wild card teams. Give me the Boston Red Sox. And then winning the division simply because of how deep they are, simply because they have probably the second best player in all the league, the best player in the American League, and Aaron Judge. It is the New York Yankees, and I do have them being the best team in the American League. I think that they'll win at least 105 games. AL Central time, hardest division to predict in the American League by a mile. Outside of last place, I have them once again repeating being the worst team in the league. I don't think they're going to be the worst team ever again, but the Chicago White Sox are in last place. The little pieces that they had are gone. Fetty's gone. Crochet's gone. What are you going to say about this team? I'm not going to hammer on them. In second to last place, I have the Minnesota Twins. I think that there's a lot of great players there, but they just can't stay healthy. Correa and Carlos Correa struggles to stay healthy. They do have Pablo Lopez. They have Bailey Ober. They have an interesting rotation, but a lot of health issues there. Byron Buxton was one that I was blanking on there, also struggles to stay healthy. I just don't think that they're going to be able to put everyone on the field at the same time. Next, I have the 50-50 shot here because there needs to be 4 wild cards because both these teams need to make it. It's the Detroit Tigers. And unfortunately, I just have the Baltimore Orioles being slightly better than the Detroit Tigers because Baltimore Orioles have more of that offensive power. I have the Tigers being the last team out of the playoffs this year, even though they have probably the best pitcher in all the league. I don't even know how to elaborate on it because there's so many names here. And I don't know. It's 50-50. It's 50-50 because I'm happy seeing the Tigers in the playoffs. I'm happy seeing the Orioles in the playoffs. I would rather see them. But again, with the way that we do divisions here in Major League Baseball, you're going to have teams that are going to win 80-some games, mid-80s, 85, 90 games even, and still miss the playoffs because you have a division winner that wins 85, wins 80, and, they get it because they won the division automatically. So am I looking at the AL West right now? Am I looking at the National League Central right now? Yeah, a little bit, and that really sucks because that negatively benefits other divisions. Anyway, Kansas City, I have them being the final wild card pick. I really think that they did a lot in the offseason. That rotation's still great. Really, all they lost was Brady Singer. And then winning the division by a close margin. And, it could be an alternation of any of these 3 teams I just talked about. I have the Cleveland Guardians. I have the Cleveland Guardians once again winning that division with probably the best bullpen in the league, with a very deep rotation, with not necessarily many household names, but still a quality starting rotation. I have the Cleveland Guardians winning, well-led team by Stephen Vogt. Next, and lastly, I have the AL West, and I have the worst team still being the Angels. I don't think that they're necessarily going to improve that much. I think they'll improve a little bit, but not to a point that they're going to not finish in last place simply because the team in front of them are just better on paper. And that team in front of them I have is a team that a lot of people are big on, thinking they're going to make a wild card. I don't necessarily buy that when you have teams like the Tigers, Royals, and Orioles in front of you. And that is the Athletics. That is the Oakland, Sacramento, whatever Athletics. I mean, a good team up and coming just needs a little bit more development from younger guys. Jacob Wilson's coming up. You got guys like Max Schumann. Other Max Muncy made the major league roster. They signed Gio Urshela. They signed Luis Severino, Zach Geloff, and then Lawrence Butler, one of the most electric players, the most electric young players in the league on that A's team. Next, I have a team missing the playoffs for the first time. And gosh, that is so. Actually, I'm going to look that up. I am genuinely curious. I have the Houston Astros. You could probably guess. I have the Houston Astros missing the playoffs for the first time since 2016. They have made outside of 2016, they've made the playoffs every single year since 2015. Obviously, won the World Series in 2017 and 2022. All the accusations aside of cheating and all of that, can't really say much, can't elaborate much. We've already talked about that. Next, I have another boom or bust team. I have the Seattle Mariners. We already talked about them a bunch. Very deep rotation, but middle infield lacking. So a lot of power lack there too. I think regardless of how good Julio Rodriguez is, that man could finish top 3 in MVP voting. And I still think they're going to miss the playoffs because of how top heavy this American League is. And then finally, winning the division, I have them coming back. I have the Texas Rangers coming back from that World Series hangover last year. They were really banged up. You got a guy like Corey Seager healthy. You got a pretty solid rotation as well. Give me the Texas Rangers. I mean, last year they went 70 and 80 or 78 and 84. A year before, World Series champions as a 90-win team. I think that's pretty impressive. But I think this year they win at least 90 to 95 games, and they maybe even make the World Series again. But you know what? That's going to be for you to find out next week, because our playoff predictions and National League predictions will be next week. So it's time for our series of the week. It is back. It is back for the first time since I think I did it for the first week of the playoffs. And after that, it's like, what's the point of it? Because there's like 4 series going on. So I have the Milwaukee Brewers and the New York Yankees as our first series of the week of 2025. 2 division winners face off. You got 2 pretty solid managers. Some people may question Aaron Boone, but I think Pat Murphy is one of the best managers in all the league. You got Freddie Peralta versus Carlos Rodon. Obviously, it's not Garrett Cole, but Freddie Peralta, one of those underrated pitchers, versus Carlos Rodon, who's a pretty darn good placeholder. And then don't forget, it's basically the first game. I think the Orioles game kicks off at 3:07. This one says 3:05. So it's going to be our first game here back in North America. And with that being said, we're about to get out of here, ladies and gentlemen. At 36 minutes we are currently at. It's time for our trivia question. And last week, who is the Mariners' all-time hits leader? And I think that you could have guessed a lot of people. You could have guessed Edgar Martinez. You could have guessed Ken Griffey Jr. But as the man who played there the second longest out of those 2 names, it is Ichiro. It is the first ballot Hall of Famer, unanimous Hall of Famer, in my opinion, Ichiro. So this week is an interesting one, kind of a hard one. Who was the opening day starter for the first ever Arizona Diamondbacks game? Who was the opening day starter for the first ever Arizona Diamondbacks game in 1998? So, National League next week. Make sure to be watching every other great program on this channel. Hoops and Helmets dropped on Monday, and they talked about March Madness. They talked about everybody's bracket being busted. So make sure to watch Aaron and Carson's show. Make sure to watch Quick Hits. Make sure to watch 3 from Deep with Jason. Make sure to watch every single great show. We got a lot of wrestling content. Don't forget about the nightcap as well, if you're into WWE, AEW, etc. But if you're into baseball, I appreciate you for watching Dugout Debrief this week, and I hope you have a fantastic week. Happy opening day.